Decision made today in Victoria that is going to see a couple of thousand people lose their job in the logging industries. Now, it might have been 3-1 before, where I was the only one who was fired up about this in our earlier panel, but I'm pretty sure you will share my sentiments that with the stroke of a pen, the Victorian government has essentially thrown these workers aside, and all of the auxiliary infrastructure that goes with it, all of the towns that go with this as well. And with a view on this is Ross Hampton from the CEO of the Australian Forest Products Association, and he joins us now in Canberra. Thank you for the chat, Ross. How do you feel about this decision that's been made in Victoria, where only plantation wood is what you'll be able to cut up, everything else goes, and that means lots of jobs with it?
It does, Paul, and your instinct was exactly right a little earlier when you said it got you fired up, and it seems wrong, and it is wrong. It's wrong on many counts. It's wrong environmentally, it's wrong for our communities, it's particularly wrong for regional Victoria, where you and I are talking reasonably late at night here, but I assure you all around regional Victoria now there's families at kitchen tables in despair, worried about their future, uncertain about their future. And there's been a lot of half-truths told today about this, and I can understand why the panel might not have had the full story either, Paul, and that's because this isn't a transition plan at all. This is closing one type of forestry in Victoria. It's like a slow-motion guillotine, if you like. It's going to take a few years, but that's what's happening, and attempting to distract everyone with suggestions of a different type of forestry, which might employ a few people somewhere down the track in Victoria, but they're very different things.
Well, the good news is the Prime Minister instinctively seems to share our view about this and is aware of these massive issues. And I look, it is frankly, and it's late enough at night for me to say this, I know not in WA, but still, it is a wank to use terms like transition. It's not transition, it's a slashing of people's jobs. It is people who run the trucks, people who feed these people. The consequences of this decision will give a warm inner glow to people on Twitter and the inner cities of Melbourne. But as you say, right now, tonight, it'll be a sleepless night in parts of country Victoria.
That's right, it absolutely will be. And the most galling thing, I think, is that there's no reason to do it. I work quite a bit internationally. I'm on one of the UN advisory committees on forestry. And you know what, Paul? When we go to those meetings in Rome, they look across at me and they say, how can we get people to do more of what you do in Australia? We want internationally accredited best practice forestry where you don't denude the landscape, where after you take a tree, you replant, you reharvest. We do that by law, and you do it at a sustainable level. If you take 10,000 trees, if you imagine that in front of you, do you know what the amount is that forestry uses in Victoria? 4 trees. Wow. And if there's habitat trees or whatever, we don't even touch them. And this old growth nonsense that people are talking about today, Vic Forest had reduced that to almost nothing, and a year ago they said they're not doing it at all. So these are just red herrings that people have been throwing up. It is sustainable. It could have gone on forever. There's been contractors crying on the media today talking about harvesting the same trees that Grandad harvested and replanted. Well, that's right. 3 or 4 generations of forestry families have been working there, and they could have gone on for many, many more generations, and it would have been great for the planet, great for the environment, great for the critters, great for the communities. And I think, and we think in forestry, that it's just about politics. And here's the real irony of the day for me. The same day that Federal Labor is getting a strong message that the regions and the country towns and those working in primary industries like agriculture, fisheries and forestry and mining are wondering whether Labor has their back, the very same day in Victoria, the Labor government says, on your way.
Well, and of course, as is always the case with this stuff, being cheered on by the inner city people, including most of the people in the media, most of the people who write about this, most of the people who tweet about this. But give me an idea of the consequence of this decision. Give me an idea of what happens in Victoria in the coming weeks.
It's going to be terrible. I mean, the Premier's tried to make a virtue of the fact that they're going to string this out over 10 years. What's going to happen is there's going to be effectively several years of enormous uncertainty as the sawmills try to deal with the coming train wreck, and then a kind of a survivor island environment with people with bits of 4x2 fighting for a 25% reduction every year on the available resource. And that's just going to be a nightmare for whoever's left, a very nasty and terrible situation. And bearing in mind, these are These are just families who've been doing the right thing, running sustainable businesses that are legitimate and providing the timber, probably for Daniel Andrews' desk, by the way. And indeed, here's the irony. The Victorian Parliament has just opened a beautiful new wing for all the politicians to sit in, completely lined with, Paul, you guessed it, Victorian hardwood timber from these forests. Yeah. If I wasn't so angry, it would make you laugh.
No, I'm with you completely. And look, we're going to have to talk a lot in the next little while because, look, this bloke's not going to reverse this decision. He's going to see a certain virtue in doing it. But how we deal with this, and I want people to see the consequences. I want people to see the consequences of this decision, and I want to make as much noise as we possibly can. I really appreciate the chat, Ross, and thanks for sticking around so late for us.